This is our Community Development Committee meeting at 6:30 on April 8th. I don't know if we have any public comments out there. I don't see any unrecognizable sign-ins, but in case there's one I don't see, are there any public comments for anything that's not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none.
Councilmember Thomas, I'm sorry, I think we forgot to provide some notes for our first committee meeting, similar to our council meeting, but just a reminder that if anyone that is online from the public or gets online wants to submit a question, they can do that via the chat feature, but the chat feature will be visible to all of us in the meeting. So just wanted to remind that, and good note to ourselves to create some better notes for committee meetings as well.
Thank you, Laura. I appreciate that. All right, next up we have public presentations, which we do not have any, and we'll move into action items. The first item is the acceptance of the March 4th, 2020 Community Development Committee minutes. Emily Randel.
Yes, I submitted those. I recorded the minutes last month and just submitted them for your review.
I think we should accept them as presented.
Wonderful. All right, next up, item number 2, we have Lamar Rehabilitation and Resurfacing UBAS contract award with Celia Duran.
And I'm actually going to kick us off, and then I will hand the baton over to Celia, and then we'll follow up with some other questions. What I think that we'll do is that we will go through, we'll start with the resurfacing part of the project, but all of these parts and pieces are so intertwined that I suspect we will kind of jump in and around on the construction inspection and the bike lane and safe routes to school as well. Obviously, we'll have 3 separate motions when we get to that point to make, but I did want to take just a little bit of time because this is a project who predates Celia joining us, so she inherited this one and is trying to get it across the finish line. But this is a project that has really been contemplated for the last, I would say, 4.5, almost 5 years. As part of the Safe Routes to School application process and study that we went through several years ago, we did submit application to the Safe Routes to School program for funding to look at incorporating bike lanes along Lamar Avenue. When this project started working its way into our CIP, we originally anticipated that it was going to be 100% city dollars. And we, in fact, were trying to stretch the dollars that we had available to us in our street program at that time as far as we could, knowing that there were likely going to have to be some reductions in scope and some other things to allow us to get that whole length of the street completed. One of the things, so if you go way back in this project's history in the capital improvement program, you'll see it start to get introduced at a budget number of about $555,000. As we really then started to look at developing and refining that project with the Safe Routes to School dollars and sort of the introduction of the UBAS treatment into our toolkit and our toolbox, we looked at excuse me, revising and updating those budget numbers. And when we brought forward both the CARS program for 2020 through 2024 and the 2020 budget, the cost and the budget for this Lamar resurfacing and bike lane project was then estimated and approved by the council to the tune of $938,060. So I'm going to turn, so basically we're looking at, as we talk about the project as it was bid and the bid prices that we have and the budget that we have, we're looking at a difference between that $900,000 number that was included in our 2020 budget and the bids that were received in early March. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Celia, let her kind of walk through some of the more technical aspects of the project, and then I will kind of step back in and share with you some of our budget comparisons and where we stand in relationship to our street CIP program overall, not just looking at this project in isolation.
So thanks to you, City Administrator Laura Smith. As you have known that this project has really evolved over time with many changes in the scope of work, the time frame, the different opportunities for funding as CARS begin to fund more maintenance or UBAS projects. So now I'm kind of going to get into the bidding and the project budget and some discussion about the overages. And then, you know, feel free to ask me questions along the way or at the end. But when the final design was completed and we received the final engineer's estimate in January of this year, it was apparent that the project costs would likely exceed the budget. We decided to go ahead and bid the project so that we could determine the extent of the overages and whether there'd be any opportunities to modify the scope so we could bring you back the best information and options to move forward. So 2 bids were received, with Superior Bowen submitting the lowest and most responsive bid in the amount of $928,994.15. And that's taking out the crack ceiling, which after bidding it, Superior Bowen recommended, you know, if you do crack ceiling, do it the year before, but if you do it with the UBAS, it's just going to pull it right up. And so that's one reason that that was taken out. So their bid did exceed the engineer's estimate by about 2.86%. However, we believe there's still a good price for the project since both bids were reasonably close. When the budget was prepared, it was not anticipated that there would be a large amount of joint repairs. So the project budget was based on conceptual unit prices. And as you can see in the table in the council action form, there's a comparison of the current budget versus estimated cost for the project. And as you can tell right now, we're estimating that we could be approximately $202,000 over the original budget. So that includes the actual costs for the UBAS portion of the project and the bike lane portion of the project. So as I talked about, the overage is primarily due to the additional joint repairs needed. So the project budget was prepared, and like I said, it was based on the conceptual unit prices. Then the engineer came in and did the survey, and as part of the design, walked the project with staff, and that was at the point where it was evident that there was a lot more joint repair necessary than was originally included in the project. The joint repair on Lamar is a lot more than most streets I see. And I don't know if when it was constructed the last time the paver stopped and started, but there's a lot more joints. If you drive it, it's really rough. And so typically you wouldn't anticipate that amount of joint repair. So in the table, the construction and inspection for the UBAS are based on the actual bid, and the bike lane construction costs and inspection are based on the engineer's estimate. Since this part of it's being administered by KDOT, we're waiting for them to bid the project, and when they estimate the days of construction, that's when we'll know how much the inspection cost will be. And typically, KDOT just has a lot of different requirements for a project than we would be. So, you know, sometimes it's, well, typically those projects are about 30% higher whenever you go through KDOT. So the 200,002 overage is estimated, and it could go down with the actual bike lane bid. Also, you know, I've estimated some additional CARS funding from a change order that we could receive up to $75,000, and that will depend upon the actual quantities during the UBAS project. So sometimes you estimate and you may get out there and there's a little more joint repair or a little less than we anticipate. So that amount could go down, but we've done our best to estimate what this overage would be. So once we determined the extent of the overage, we got together and performed our due diligence and evaluated the most efficient way to get this important project completed and maximize our resources with available funding. So we talked about a lot of different things. We looked at, well, maybe we should remove some of the concrete work. Maybe we should just do half of the project. We originally assumed full-time inspection. You know, what would that do to cut back to part-time? Should we remove the bike lanes and turn down the Safe Routes to School funding, since, you know, part of that is we're going through KDOT. So we talked about a lot of those things. But based on our evaluation and the bid negotiations with Superior Bowen with the crack ceiling, the modifications to inspection to part-time, and the opportunity to obtain the additional CARS funding that can be assessed through the change order, our recommendation would still to move forward with the project with the scope of work as proposed. We're also, in the future, I just wanted to point out that we're always looking at better ways to improve our project estimating, since our goal is always to bring our projects forward with, of course, a quality project, under budget, and within schedule. So I believe in the future, we can be successful with bringing in projects within budget. And of course, this project was a different one with all the different nuances to it. So that helped to contribute to the overage. But once the work by Stantec is completed, we'll have a prioritized list of projects so we can begin project scoping and prepare more detailed cost estimates ahead of schedule. We'll also, you know, always want to work on more detailed scoping meetings. So we're really thinking about, you know, oh, there's a drainage problem here. Look at the concrete sidewalk. It needs more work. And, you know, doing a walkthrough prior to setting a project budget and bringing in the project designer earlier so that we can really get a good idea of what the cost would be. The other thing is, I think in the past, we've tried to bring in projects, you know, and try to really keep the project amount as low as we, you know, not provide a lot of additional contingency. Here's the cost. But as you find out, sometimes when you go through from the concept to the design, it's good to have some additional contingency in the project. That way, if you identify additional improvements, you will have that budget and not have to go back and worry about how you would fund this. So, as mentioned earlier, we believe this project is really important. I mean, it's one of our, you know, most important north-south thoroughfares, and we'd really like to see it move forward. It's a vital project, and we'd like to be able to take advantage of the available external funding from CARS and Safe Routes to School, which actually will fund up to 50% of the project. So if the council approves this project, construction is anticipated to begin around May 1st, hopefully after the stay-at-home order, and it should take about 90 days. And we've had ongoing conversations with Superior Bowen about their practices as far as ensuring social distancing, and they do have 2 safety officers, and they, on all their projects, they meet with them every day and are talking about protocols and always looking at ways to keep, you know, everybody safe. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Celia, it's Debbie. Superior Bowen is out of where? Where are they located?
I think they're out of Missouri, but they do work all over. And in fact, they just, I don't know if you've heard of O'Donnell and Son.
Yeah.
They just bought them out. So now the bigger contractors in the area that do, you know, this local work for cities and federal work as well.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Celia, it's Trent.
Go ahead, Trent.
Thanks. I was just curious on that $422,000 CARS funding. So is that locked in, like we would be for sure getting that, or is that still subject to like the county's review and acceptance?
So since that $422,000 was approved last year, so the next item will be an interlocal that will lock them in and lock us in.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have any other questions for Celia?
Great job, Celia.
The one thing
thank
I
you.
might add, and then I'll ask Emily to share a document that we can all look at that looks like kind of a budget comparison. is that it's hard to do a clean 50% comparison on the CARS funding because this project also has federal Safe Routes to Schools dollars in it. The county takes those contributions into account, and so it, in theory, in actuality, reduces a pure 50% contribution on that. So that's why you see a little bit of sort of squishiness around that 50% calculation. And obviously, as Celia mentioned, we're in the process right now of working through with the county. They put out a call just this past week about SMAC and CARS projects and anyone who may or may not be able to move forward. And so a concern, obviously, with delaying would be that we might not have access to that $475,000-$85,000. So Emily, if you will share the budget document, and I emailed this to everybody on the council just in advance of the meeting, but if you can share that document, I just want to run through quickly kind of some comparisons, because if you go back to the CIP that was approved, and actually, Emily, if you'll make it a little bit bigger, we'll just have to scroll up and down. Thank you. If you look at what was approved in our 2020 budget, that is going to be the first column on the left, the 2019 and 2020 budget. And if we just quickly sort of go through that, you'll see what we anticipated in CARS reimbursements and from all of our other revenue streams. And scroll down to the bottom on that side. And what you can see is that we went into we were anticipating an ending fund balance of about $542,000 at the end of 2019. And then with the projects that we had in the mix for 2020, we were going to reduce that overall street program fund balance to about $53,546. Now these are funds that come from our capital improvement fund, our street sales tax fund, and our special highway fund. So this is a combination. There's not one clean place in the budget where you can go look. The CIP is really kind of the cleanest place that we look at that. So we were already in what we approved in the 2020 budget, looking at bringing that ending fund balance down to a fairly low number. So what I wanted to do was say, okay, what happens then, obviously, if you're looking at an overage in your project budget, we want to go back in and revise those budget numbers based on the best information that we have available at this time. So if you'll scroll back up to the top, please. What we've done, we just got the first draft of the 2019 CAFR today, so trying to work with audited numbers. If you look at 2019 actuals, so the 7 mills dedicated to streets, that stayed the same. We actually did better. Our street sales tax performed better than what we anticipated in the budget. What you will see is in 2020 on the revenue side, I'm trying to be conservative. So what I wanted to show you was what happens in a conservative budget dealing with 2019 actuals on the revenue and expense side if we look at proceeding with the Lamar project. So what you'll see there is we historically bring down that 7 mills dedicated to streets. I think that number will be higher because the 2021 mill levy is already established. The only thing that we anticipate we might see is more delinquencies. That would be the thing that would reduce our property tax receipts in this year going into next year. So I think that number is conservative at 975. And then I took a 20% reduction in the street sales tax in 2020 and said, okay, instead of, I believe we had $600,000 budgeted in the approved budget for 2020. I took a 20% reduction and showed that number there. CARS reimbursements, we went in and plugged in actual amounts for the Broadmoor project and then what we're anticipating for Lamar, as well as actual receipts in 2019 in the special highway fund at $259,641. You'll see in 2020 I brought the special highway receipts down. That those receipts are based on gas tax, and with what we've seen happening in the price of gasoline, I wanted to take a reduction in those revenues as well. And then the $68,000 is the Safe Routes to School funding for the Lamar project. So you'll see that we did, make some reductions in anticipated revenues and kind of looking at this revised structure. So now, Emily, if you'll please scroll down to the expense side. If we look at, then what you'll see is Broadmoor, and these are actual costs. If you add the two numbers for Broadmoor in 19 and 20 in the right-hand column up, we are about $1,300 over what we had included in last year's budget, and that's primarily as a result of the delay in the signal installation. It costs us a little bit more in time on the project side. So that project was effectively is wrapped up, and those costs are final. You'll see we've plugged in the $1,140,083 for the Lamar project that we're discussing currently. I left a placeholder. We'd started adding placeholders for full depth reconstruction projects into our street program CIP. So I left that dollar amount there. You'll see that I left the $300,000 in residential street program and maintenance funding and bridge maintenance budgets for 2020. What you will see is the difference. We didn't have anything budgeted for the residential street program in 2019, and you will see a higher number. You'll see that $163,000 in residential street program, and you'll also see a higher number in public works maintenance programs, and that's driven by several factors. So we know that we're coming off of a really rough winter, and so we did a tremendous amount of pothole patching and crack sealing and repair work, and that's what makes up, while we didn't do necessarily a chip seal program, what we did was a lot of patching and repairs there. We also had some chip seal costs that we shared with the City of Overland Park, and they didn't invoice us in the correct year, so we got invoiced in 2019 for 2018 work. So that's reflected in that budget. Also reflected in that budget is the mill and overlay on the cul-de-sac at, I think it's Kristen Street, and I never can remember whether it's 52nd Street or 52nd Terrace, but that project, which was a carryover. So that's why you see some of those expenses, and a couple. Oh, and then the Foxridge patching. You'll recall that we brought forward in 2019 a $25,000 contract to do some extensive patching on Foxridge. So many of those costs, while they were zero in that left-hand column, were either just the result of increased maintenance work that we needed to do because of the condition of the roads, or projects that we brought forward to you throughout the year, which were approved. You'll see on the bridge maintenance side, the big piece of that in 2019 was the Reeds Road bridge repairs. Again, another project we brought forward and council specifically approved in 2019. And we had been carrying over bridge maintenance funds for many, many years. And those were just being carried in fund balances. Really no changes in your debt service, with the exception of we had $1 million placeholder in our tough settlement line item. We are now through that, and we know that our obligation there is the $609,820. So we were able to achieve and return some of those funds back. So what you'll see is the bottom line ending 2019 improved, and even with the reductions in anticipated revenues and the increase in the Lamar resurfacing, we improved on that fund balance. Now, one thing, I didn't show you the full 5-year program, but I think that one of the things that we've been talking about internally is that $528,420 that you see on the left-hand column for Foxridge. That was design for that next phase of Foxridge, with construction in 2021. That construction, those construction costs are in excess of $4.5 million. Not something we are going to be able or have ever had the capacity to cash flow, which means we will need to talk about a potential debt issue to move forward with that next phase of Foxridge. But until we answer the question about renewal of a street sales tax, I think we absolutely, it's premature to talk about a debt issuance with no repayment source. So we have actually moved that and will recommend as we go through the project. But what these numbers reflect is pushing that design in from 2020 to 2021, giving us the opportunity then to put the game plan in place and figure out how to get a sales tax out in front of our voters, and do that also in conjunction with the Stantec data that we will have in hand as we go into the development of the 2021 budget, and really being able to put together that clearer and more comprehensive picture of the street program overall. So I'll stop there, but I did want to show you that even with conservative revenue estimates and the increase in this project budget, I think we still have some flexibility in our street program CIP funding.
Great, thank you, Laura. This is such a visible project. To the public, I'm really excited to get this going. This was originally slated, I think, for 2019. So getting this going sooner rather than later is exciting. Do we have any other thoughts or comments before we consider moving this to, I'm assuming, non-consent?
Laura, I had a couple questions.
Sure.
First, I was wondering how confident we are about getting the additional $75,000 in CARS funding. And then my second question for Laura was sort of how we're working through these estimated revenue changes and what the conservative estimates are based on, if you can give kind of a high level understanding of that.
So for the first question, I'm pretty confident about the 75,000 because that's a part of the CARS, part of the CARS program that's in their bylaws. So we should get it now. In the future, they may, cut back on some of the funding, but they will obligate what they have for this year.
And then as far as kind of the revenue projections, we don't have, at a very high level, we have not yet received sales tax receipts or gas tax receipts, which include any of the implications of this whole COVID-19 situation. So what my estimates are based on currently, and we won't have those receipts till we get probably closer to June. So gas tax receipts are remitted quarterly, and sales tax receipts are remitted monthly, but there's a 2-month lag from the time that those are collected and remitted to the state, from the time they're turned around and sent to the cities. So I have kind of used those estimates. Our first quarter of 2020, our sales tax receipts and our gas tax receipts are on track with our budgeted numbers. So I really used reduction percentages at this point on the high end of what I know my colleagues in other cities in Johnson County are using and working and looking at potential budgetary impacts. So again, I think that based on what we've seen so far and what we saw last year, it's a little bit of an unknown, and right now we're in a good position. Many of our, fellow cities in Johnson County actually saw sales tax declines in 2019. We did not see that. So we ended the year strong from sales tax receipt perspective. Our first quarter was right on track with budget. but we do expect that there will be some implications as we move through the rest of this year.
Thanks, Laura. I think that's reassuring to hear that it's based on the high end of the estimated revenue reduction, sort of in the discussion among staff or across the county, it sounds like. So
Yes.
good.
Okay, any other questions or thoughts surrounding this for Laura or Celia?
I just wanted to say,
Oh.
I just
Okay.
wanted to say thank you to Laura for putting this together. It's very helpful.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Agreed. Okay, are we ready to move this on to non-consent?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, very connected is our next item. Item number 3, Lamar Construction Inspection Services Contract with Celia Duran.
Okay, well, so we've talked about this a little bit in the last agenda item, but this interlocal agreement with Johnson County Cars for the Lamar Avenue project would be using CARS fundings in an amount not to exceed $422,000. So this interlocal specifies the county's obligation for that amount of money and commits the city funds to the project. And CARS pays 50% of the city's construction and inspection costs, assuming the city has the matching funds. So as we talked about, that they will pay up to $75,000 for a change order, and that would be assuming 50% funding as well. So we have it, I requested the additional funding, and just as I noted, the actual amount up to $75,000 will depend on how the project quantities come out. And I'd be happy to answer questions.
No, thank you. So I think we jumped to number 4. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm good if we go ahead and move with number 4, and then we can hop back to number 3 since you just gave us that great synopsis. Does that work for
Okay.
everyone? Okay.
And if you would, Martha just asked if we can, if someone can specifically make that recommendation, so that we can, typically in the minutes, we will identify who has made the recommendation to move something forward to council. She can get her minutes updated more accurately. So she was going to include Ken as the recommender on the item number 2, if you're comfortable with that.
Yes, I am. And maybe since Sally did the other,
So are we looking for a recommendation to move the CARS interlocal forward? I would recommend we move that forward, I guess also non-consent, since they're kind of all interrelated.
That makes sense. Before we do that, were there any thoughts or questions surrounding the interlocal agreement? Okay. So now can we pop back to item number 3, the Lamar Construction Inspection Services Contract?
Yes, so this item is consideration of a construction inspection services agreement with Pfefferkorn Engineering and Environmental LLC for construction inspection services for the Lamar project in an amount not to exceed $39,040. So Pfefferkorn, I know I don't think they've done any work for the city before, but as part of the bike lane project, KDOT requires you to go through a qualifications process. And so they submitted request for qualifications, and Pfefferkorn came back on the bike lanes for inspection. So in order to ensure continuity through the project and based on their experience and qualifications performing inspection of KDOT projects, we would recommend approval of this agreement with Pfefferkorn. And their scope of work includes part-time inspection and materials testing based on a 90-day construction timeline.
Great. Any questions for Celia or Laura surrounding action item number 3? Okay.
I had one quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know how them specifically or KDOT approved contractors tend to compare in cost to the firms we usually use?
I think it depends on the firm.
Okay.
This firm has a lot lower overhead, so we're really seeing good prices there.
Okay, great.
That's part of, besides the qualifications, the continuity, that's one reason we're really interested in. And we had a meeting with them too as well, and we feel comfortable that they have the knowledge to proceed with the project.
Well, and I do think Celia deserves some credit because we did have proposals from 2 other firms for construction inspection. That even if they were both full-time, but even if we reduce those scopes to part-time, I think you're looking at significantly higher amounts, $20,000 to $30,000 more for part-time inspection from those. So we wanted to make sure that, we vetted this firm since we haven't worked with them before, but really went looking for those savings on the construction inspection side.
Great.
Wonderful. Okay, do we have a recommendation for action item number 4?
3. Aren't we on 3?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Hop back to
3.
number 3. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that.
Number 3.
I
Madam
move we
Chair.
keep the council non-consent.
Yes, seconded.
Wonderful. Okay, let's move on to item number 5. We have our update to the tree plan with Penn Almany.
Good evening, council. So the Chapter 230 of the Mission Municipal Council dictates that in even-numbered years, the Parks, Recreation, and Tree Commission review the tree plan and make recommendations for any updates or inclusions. Maintaining the tree plan in its current format is a requirement as part of the Tree City USA designation. So on March 16, 2020, the PRT Commission reviewed the tree plan as well as chapters 230 and 240 of the Mission Municipal Code. And the loan modification they propose is under the interface with the community section. Regarding the information sharing, they recommended that we change the language to exclude newsletter and include Mission Magazine and city social media channels, because the consensus was that social media channels are a great source of sharing and should be used more frequently. In addition to that information, the Kansas Forest Service is the Park, Recreation, and Tree Commission's primary reference in determining if any species of tree should be added or removed from the list of prohibited trees. And at this time, there are no additions or deletions recommended by the Kansas Forest Service. Laura's got some additional information that's going to be shared under the interface with other public entities and utility providers section.
Laura, do you want to go ahead and share that portion?
Yes, please. Emily, if you could share the screen. I did email this to the council and we'll update the packet. But after we distributed the packet on Friday, Councilmember Davis reached out and reminded me that we had some fairly extensive conversation in 2019 when we brought this plan forward about his concern about addressing a section in our tree plan that dealt with an interface with, last year we talked specifically about KDOT and particularly the areas of KDOT right-of-way that abut our city and some of the concerns of tree maintenance there. It's a little bit of a, and I just quite honestly, in the mix of everything, forgot to go back and do that. So I took the opportunity since last Friday to kind of go back and have had some additional conversations and wanted to present this language, recognizing that the primary goal of the tree plan is looking at the development, maintenance, and education about trees on our public property. I do think that there, and support Councilmember Davis's, idea or thought that I think it's important to address this interface with other public entities such as KDOT, and you'll see we've expanded that to include utility providers, just based on a lot of the conversations that we've had over the last year with Evergy and their tree trimming practices and all of those kinds of things. Recognizing that we have relatively limited control and we don't necessarily have resources directed to this, We did want to just include this section, which is highlighted in red here, really as a reminder and a placeholder that these are also agencies and entities that we interact with as it relates to our urban forest and the tree canopy in our city, and that it just sort of keeps it out in front of us as we think about ways that we might influence or impact maintenance of trees in those areas that are not controlled by us, but that are controlled by other sort of quasi-public entities. So I really just tried to capture that while we understand that the plan is really written to focus on trees on public property, there are other places where we regularly interact with people on issues related to trees, and that maintenance in those areas has the potential to impact us in a number of ways, including aesthetic considerations, disruption of utility service, and potentially damage to public or private property. And then really wanted to say many of the things as you read through the tree plan point back to the responsibility of the PRT in managing and administering the tree plan. I think this is an area where we wanted to be clear that the PRT would acknowledge that staff would be responsible for identifying and maintaining the appropriate communication strategies and channels with these other entities and providers so that we could most effectively share information and have questions or concerns addressed in a consistent and well-documented manner. It seemed to make more sense for staff to do that than our volunteer board and commission members. And then if there are additional policies, practices, or information that are desired to address maintenance in these areas, that those would be referred to the Parks, Recreation, and Tree Commission for further review, evaluation, or recommendation. So if we wanted to do additional trimming or dedicate additional resources to things, we would then create the mechanism and the process to bring those forward and have those conversations. So I don't know if Councilmember Davis has anything that he would like to add there, but I do think that it is appropriate to add this section, and I don't think that based on who has responsibility for management and communication of this section, that I don't feel as if it is that we would need to send the entire tree plan back to the PRT for another round of review and approval. I think the council, you are the final approvers of the tree plan, and you could certainly take action on this, and then we could communicate this piece back to them.
This is Ken Davis. First of all, I want to say thank you to Laura for the work that you did, and along with Penn, to try to include this information in the plan. I also thought you might want to discuss the way that we handle the creeks and waterways, because that was another element that we discussed. I believe that you indicated that that's really captured within the storm water process. Is that correct?
Yes, and I'm sorry, you also had some questions about or looking to how we would maintain trees in our creeks and waterways. And I think, you know, that there are some nuances there in terms of generally we're looking to take trees out of creeks and waterways as opposed to planting or maintaining an urban forest there. I know that Public Works has been working on a rotating creek cleanout plan, which we'll bring back and can share as we go through development of our upcoming stormwater capital improvement program. That would certainly be an ongoing maintenance cost and item in that, as well as I know that Penn and Celia and Brent have been working on park maintenance standards overall that include some pieces of tree maintenance. And so both of those things are they're not ready for your review and discussion yet. They're still works in progress, but we would anticipate later this year bringing both of those forward. And then if appropriate, they could be introduced in the tree plan. The other comment that I would make is that I took a little bit of time this afternoon to reach out to some of our other neighboring communities who are also Tree City USA, recognized as tree cities. to look at their tree plans and see how their tree plans compare to ours, and what sorts of issues they're looking at. I haven't collected all of them, but I would say that the ones that I have had the opportunity to look at briefly today look a lot different than ours. The tree plan is something that is supposed to be reviewed and revised in even numbered years. And so that may be something that we want to take a deeper dive into, to look to see if there are some other ideas or thoughts in other cities' tree plans that we may want to incorporate into ours.
Laura, I had a question related to that point. I know ours is a lot about replacement and maintenance only, and there isn't anything about recommendations for expansion to the canopy or really even additional diversification beyond sort of what we already have. And so in those other cities, are we seeing more of that sort of information, or are those expansion measures something that the council should be putting forward in the first instance, not PRT?
Well, if I told you I had read through all the tree plans I collected this afternoon, I would not be being truthful. So we will certainly look at that. But I do think, and that's part of why I did want to start to collect those, because I know coming out of our February retreat, the expansion and or maintenance of the urban forest and our tree canopy was something that did receive a lot of votes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's certainly something that we'll want to incorporate in that. So I think that message, I think we'll want to come back and probably get some additional clarity from the council as we start to follow up on those items, particularly through the budget process. But I think some of that direction was already established, or at least the arrow was pointed in that direction when we came out of our February retreat.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Did anyone from any of the other cities provide any feedback on their interactions with KDOT and maintenance and any KDOT spaces that they share?
I did not ask that specifically, so I wanted to get their plans and have a chance to go through those. You know, and I didn't ask a lot of questions today, as I know everybody's chasing a variety of other COVID-19 related things, but that's certainly one of the things that I want to follow up on. Our sort of anecdotal experience and conversations over the years tells us that our experience in terms of getting a quick resolution, because essentially what KDOT does now is they remove dead trees. They don't do any sort of routine and regular maintenance. But that's been everybody's experience, so I don't think anybody has a better system necessarily. I think our hope is with some of the utility companies, particularly with Evergy. You know, one of the things that they shared with us in the presentation was trimming of circuits, and they'll start to identify for us and share with us which circuits in our community they're trimming in a particular year, so that we can do a better job of sort of managing and looking at those. So I think, I don't think it's going to be easy, and I think it'll be challenging to move the needle, but it's certainly worth the conversation.
And do we know if there's been any disruptions in utility service or damage on that public KDOT right-of-way area in the last few years from lack of tree maintenance?
No, but I think there are other places in private utility easements where there are, you know, because Evergy or KCP&L has been behind, or, you know, have had some challenges with tree trimming. I think we have seen some of that disruption in service. And that's certainly, you know, part of what we're evaluating with them.
Okay. Hillary?
Yes.
I'm ready to go ahead and move this forward if the rest of the council's ready.
Great. Consent or non-consent?
Consent, yeah.
Okay. Great. Next up, we have department updates with Laura Smith.
I do have just a couple here, and then a couple more that I'll do under finance and admin. Just sort of community development related, I wanted to share with you you know, as you know, we've got our staff, wherever possible, we've reduced our staffing to 50% or less than regular levels. So for example, in our Public Works Department, we've got 2 crews and they're alternating days. One of the things they have been working on this week is getting our playgrounds mulched. This is a great time because no one is using the playground equipment. And so it's a great opportunity for our crews to get in and get that mulch put down. So that's one of the things that they have been working on. We've had some challenges with equipment breakdowns. And so we've had a couple of calls for people saying, well, they're moving awfully slow. But that has been equipment related issues, certainly not staff related issues. I also wanted to just let you know that, you know, to the extent that we can, and I think we're getting creative and staff is getting creative in terms of how do we continue to deliver services in this environment. One of the things that we haven't really shared with you specifically relates to code enforcement, but Becca Brown, who is our code enforcement officer since the stay-at-home orders, has been driving through the community. She knows sort of our hot spots for code enforcement issues, and she's been kind of keeping an eye and watching those. And to date, she hasn't had to have any follow-up on any of those properties. But she will continue to drive the community a couple of times a week, noting violations, taking photographs. She's able to draft the notice letters at home, and then we'll drop those letters off at City Hall on Fridays to be mailed out. So we're not going to do and spend a lot of time on really proactive code enforcement at this point, but certainly want to make sure that, particularly as we move into the spring and spring rains and the potential for grass and vegetation to start to get out of hand, which it can do very quickly, then we do have somebody, and I just wanted to let you all know that we do plan to continue to do that through this stay-at-home period. So Jim Brown in his time, and he's been in the office most of the time doing building inspections, and so he keeps an eye on it as well. So I think if you hear things, please don't hesitate to pass those on to us, because we are continuing to work on that. I think most of you knew and had the opportunity to meet our new city planner, Caitlin Service, at the joint work session that we had with the Planning Commission. But Caitlin, her first day was March 30th, so we brought her on board, and so she is working remotely, and Brian is sending all sorts of projects and things her way. And the last thing I would have on kind of related to community development type items is, I hope you have all seen on social media since we had to cancel our Bunny Extravaganza event this year, Jenny Smith and Nick Shepard of our recreation staff have done a great job of promoting a mission egg hunt. And so you can go on social media and download an Easter egg and color that and put it in your window, and then families are encouraged between now and Sunday to sort of get out in the community and see how many eggs that they can spot. So I'm encouraging staff I'll be putting a couple up here at City Hall, and I'm encouraging staff to put them in the windows of our vehicles. And so as people see us out and about, we can do that. So if you haven't downloaded your Easter egg, please do. Since all of your addresses are out there publicly on the website, put an Easter egg in your window and give folks a great activity. And then I think just really watch over the next week, 2 weeks, you'll see some additional kind of virtual or activities that families can participate in while still maintaining kind of the stay-at-home orders and the social distancing if there are things that they are doing while they are out and about. So that's all I have for this evening.
Could I ask a quick question, Laura?
Yes.
Just as an example for code enforcement purposes, I know I've talked to Nilo, and he has talked to Village Inn several times about the north side of their building that needs to be painted. Would it be more conducive to do it during this time where it's not open, or would that be a possibility of defying the distance if there's more than 2 or 3 people painting?
Well, I think that's a little bit unclear about whether those kinds of maintenance activities, I think we would err on the side at this point of not pushing those kinds of situations forward. Because in a perfect world, what we want is everybody to stay home, to the extent that they can. So yes, if I think that's not one that probably makes sense for us to push at this time. But we can certainly make sure when we come out from underneath the stay-at-home order that that's one that we continue to follow up on.
Thanks.
It's also difficult if they're closed. They may be having financial difficulties as well. So to add a burden of painting on top of that might really be a problem as well. I did have a question about how is the court being handled right now?
Well, we had deferred in our original emergency disaster proclamation. We had basically pushed all of our court activity out through May 12th. And so court staff has been sending letters and following up with anybody who had been scheduled on a docket in that interim period and getting them rescheduled. So, as the officers they're still able to issue citations. And in fact, our court schedules tend to run about 30 days out. So, at the time we went into this situation, we were already out to May court dates. So the court staff is they're on a staggered schedule. So there is someone here Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 to answer the phone and answer the email. And they have done a really outstanding job of coordinating their communication and their work to keep up with and respond to those court questions. And I will tell you, as someone who's been in City Hall helping to answer the phones, that I would say that probably the greatest number of calls that we get are people concerned about missing their court dates or calling for court information. So I think I don't know if that answers your specific question. And if it's more specific, much more specific, I probably can't answer it.
No, that answers my question. Thank you very much.
Laura, I did have one related question. And sorry if this catches you off guard a little. I'd be happy to get this information later. But do we know how many people are in the Johnson County Jail that are incarcerated on Mission municipal offenses? And have we been checking on what the jail is doing related to safety measures with COVID-19?
We have not. So yes, we can certainly find that out, but we have not. That's not been something we've slowed down to monitor at this point.
How is the rest of the staff doing in terms of exposure, and is that something you can share publicly?
Right now, we don't have anybody who is quarantining or isolating for any reason. So I think, I know, yay. We're checking in. As you all know, we're communicating at least twice a week with our employees. Every Tuesday and Friday, they can expect to get some communication from us. I think people are doing, it's remarkable. I mean, I know we have remarkable people, and I've known that for a long time, but the things that people are doing to stay busy and to serve our residents and our businesses are really, really just phenomenal.
Laura, I would love to hear an update from from either chief or from you surrounding police and COVID-19, but if that's something you're holding or would be more appropriate for FNA, then that would be fine with me too.
No, I don't have a specific update. So when you say specific, so tell me kind of what you want to hear about, and then when we get to finance and admin, I'm happy to try to address that.
Sure. So I would just like to know what's going on in our police department surrounding COVID-19. I think I asked last week at our meeting what kind of precautionary practices our police department was taking to help protect our officers. But beyond that, I'm just curious, kind of general you know, it sounds like traffic is down kind of across the board. It sounds like accidents are down. So I'm just curious what is going on. And I feel like Chief would have a good sense of that.
Sure. I don't know, Chief, do you want to take that now or do you want to wait till finance and admin?
Either one is fine with me.
Okay, why don't you go ahead now? It's good.
Okay. So yes, accidents across the metro are down. There's just fewer people out on the street. I will tell you that our calls for service during the daytime and overnight has decreased. Our calls for service on the evening shift has stayed the same or actually increased. So as Laura's told you, the police department is in full swing as far as patrol goes. Everybody is healthy and working. A lot of what we're doing is education and helping the businesses that have questions or people that have questions. I will tell you that not a huge increase in auto burglaries, but we seem to be having about an auto burglary once a day, which is not uncommon. And we've talked about people locking their car doors and stuff, which is still not happening. But some of the more violent crimes are still continuing. And one of the things that most people have found across the metro is the more that people are at home together, disturbance calls are going up more, and family arguments, because everybody's together most of the time because they're staying at home. So, and again, as far as our equipment goes, we've got good equipment. And Laura and Dan Madden and our ICS team that meets daily has been working very good together on making sure that we have equipment. I think we had discussed it last week that we're like every other police department. We are scrambling and trying to find equipment just as every law enforcement agency in the country is doing. So, but as of right now, we're doing very good and working good with all the other departments in Johnson County.
Thank you. That's really what I was looking for.
Okay, I think we don't have anything else for department reports.
Great. We're almost within an hour. So it's 7:33 and that will end our Community Development Committee meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Great. And now we will begin our Finance and Administration Committee meeting. I think we can keep it probably under an hour. It's a short agenda tonight. First, we don't have any public hearings. Now will be the time for public comments. I don't see anyone signed on, but if we had any public comments for items not on our agenda tonight. Next, public presentations. We don't have any tonight. Our action items. The first action item is acceptance of the March 4th, 2020 Finance and Administration Committee minutes. Emily Randel.
I also submit these for your review.
I move that we
Questions? Yes, Ken?
just, I think we should go ahead and accept them.
Okay. All right. Next, our only other item tonight is our surplus property resolution. Brian Scott.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is our annual, not annual, but routine surplus distribution. We have a number of items from different departments. These include several vehicles from the Public Works Department, 2006 International dump truck, and then 2006 Ford 450, two of those, and then a Vermac message board, which is one of those flashy message boards I see along the side of the road that gives various messages to drivers that go by. Those are all included in our surplus equipment, as well as a number of items from the police department, including duty uniforms and honor medals. We also have a number of items from the Parks and Recreation Department. These are primarily old radios, walkie-talkies they no longer use. Some electronic equipment from the various meeting rooms, and some old computers. if these are acceptable for surplusing, we will dispose of the vehicles through an online auction, Purple Wave. And then the other items we will dispose of, the electronic items we'll dispose of through a company that we use to recycle various electronic materials and then dispose of those in a safe manner.
All right, thank you, Brian. Any questions from anyone or entertain a recommendation on this?
Yeah, this is Ken Davis. I would go ahead and recommend that we put this on a consent agenda.
All right.
Celia, I had a quick comment real quick.
Yes.
I toured Public Works right before the lockdown. I appreciate Brent and Celia walking me through and showing me that department. And one of the things I learned from this trip was that Mission takes such good care of its vehicles specifically and a lot of its public work items that a lot of cities actually get really excited when Mission specific inventory comes up on these sites. And we actually are able to like recoup a lot of our investment just based on the quality of our inventory and how good we take care of things. So props to that department, and pretty interesting to learn about. So that's all.
Yeah, good ad. All right, anything else on this item? We don't have any other action items tonight or discussion items. Laura, it sounded like you have some additional department updates for us.
I do. I have just a couple of things. I emailed you earlier this evening our budget calendar for 2021. I had told you all last week about availability on our fourth Wednesday work session dates. I think with COVID-19 implications and impacts and the fact that we're a little bit behind schedule in our regular budget process because of that, we don't want to try to wear out everybody's brain cells by having long budget conversations on our regular agendas. So we had targeted trying to use those fourth Wednesday work session meetings for really deep dives into our budget where we can stay focused on those particular topics. So I sent you those. We'll get those budget dates out, and particularly those ones that will interface with the public. We'll get those posted on the website, but our first meeting would be the 27th of May, Wednesday, May 27th. So we'll get those out there. I think most of you know Kevin Fullerton had sort of revived the Mission Forward social media accounts, and it has been doing a tremendous amount of work the last couple of weeks to invigorate and energize and rally and support our local mission businesses through this time. This week, we have been working and helping them they launched a specific website where our mission businesses can go put information about whether they're open, what activities or services they're offering during this time. If you haven't seen that, you can go to it's www.missionbusiness.org, and you can see a listing of those kinds of things. We have been working and will continue to work to help support our businesses in that effort. It's a great resource, and been working with Kevin this week to try to reach some of the businesses that maybe aren't as visible along the Johnson Drive corridor and the ones that we all typically think of. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that, I would encourage you to do so. Obviously, we're doing that and thinking about the appropriate messaging and where those businesses fall in terms of restrictions or requirements based on existing stay-at-home orders, but certainly want to be able to support through this process.
Is that a separate link, Laura, or do we have a link on our city website that gives us that as well?
I don't think, Emily's shaking her head no, which tells me we haven't put that up.
It's not up, it just went up yesterday. So we'll we talked to them about it before we even posted it, but we will do so. But it's a separate link at this point.
It's missionbusiness.org, right?
Missionbusiness.org, yes.
Yeah, I think if that could get added to our, COVID page, that would be great too, to support.
Yes, absolutely. The other thing that we did, and I think I communicated with you all last week, so you're aware of it, but we did reach out individually to each of our churches in Mission last week just to discuss with them their plans. And all of our churches indicated that despite a variety of information that has come out, and there's been more that has come out in executive orders and votes of the legislature today and all sorts of things, but they did not have plans to be meeting in person. They have set themselves up to meet virtually. And I have to say that, you know, just the thoughtful and thoughtful response by all of our faith-based communities here in Mission was really impressive. So that was the focus of some communication and direct communication last week. This week we are working on something similar with our multifamily properties and property managers, just kind of reaching out, touching base, making sure that they're connected to resources and information that they can share with their residents, and then, you know, looking for ways that we can help support them through this time as well. So that's what, you know, internally, particularly on your incident command team, a lot of our time is being spent just reaching out in these various sectors. You know, part of the benefit of being a small community is we can do that and make it more personal and individualized. So that has been our focus. And then I will end on a high note. I'm hopeful. I think everybody knows that every year we work with Bruce Kimmel, our financial advisor at Ellers, and we look at and evaluate all of our existing debt and see if there are opportunities for refunding or early retirement or any of those kinds of things. So it's something that we go through at least once a year, if not multiple times over the course of the year. But we have identified what we think is a fairly strong candidate for a potential refunding. I'm going to give you the high-level overview, and then we'll be sending out some information later this week with kind of a specific timetable. But roughly, it would be a refunding or a restructuring of our 2010 B bonds, and those are stormwater related. And we think we have the opportunity to save, they are retired in 2029. We think that we have the opportunity to save upwards of $600,000 in interest over the remaining life of that issue. And so absolutely, you know, COVID-19 or not, we think that's something that's worth pursuing. And so we will be doing that and bringing that forward to you all. I think right now we're looking at, we could have the potential for some early retirement, but I think looking, and we're going to look at a couple of different structures, but I think that freeing up interest savings kind of at a more level rate over the remaining years of this gives us the greatest amount of flexibility in reacting and responding to other potential stormwater projects. But again, we're kind of looking at coming at this from all angles, but I think we're excited about the opportunity to be able to reduce those interest savings and stretch those dollars farther. So that's all I have for department updates, unless anybody has any other questions.
Thank you for everything you're doing with the
Yes.
employees and making Mission look wonderful on every front. We really appreciate it.
Well,
And being wonderful, not just looking wonderful.
it's thanks to the support. It's your support and leadership that help us get there, right? So we appreciate that, but we are all part of this team, and you know, I'm proud. I'm very proud of what we're doing as a community, and that includes our businesses and our residents.
I did have one question. I know that we are getting surveyed by Crux, right? And I didn't know if you wanted to, or Emily wanted to discuss that at all in terms of how that's going.
Emily, you can take that one. You have to unmute yourself.
think I thought I was. The crux work's going well, and the survey that you have established with them, if everyone has seen an email from them and responded, that we wanted for sure for you each to have your own individual time with them. And we've worked with them some for questions we're curious about, but really this is just an opportunity for you to be honest with them and set the tone of what you think success with this work would look like. So we're really interested in having you have that forum with them, just one-on-one. That'll be, of course, rolled up into all the other research that we're working with them on, guiding them through, and that they're diving into. So we're excited to hear feedback. And we've set up a few other interviews. Like we've mentioned before, we had thought of focus groups initially, and those won't be happening in person, but we're trying to supplement as close as we can with the online survey targeted to various stakeholder groups as well as to the overall public. And then additionally, these individual interviews and anything else we think we need to fill in, but it's off and running. So that's great.
Great.
Thank you very much.
All right, if there's nothing else, then that concludes our Finance Administration Committee meeting.
Happy Easter, everybody.
And Passover.
And
I was
Passover.
gonna say, and Passover.
Thanks.
All right,
All right.
thank you.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.